Someone's coming.
The court is now in session, everyone. Please remain seated. This will be over very quickly. Mario, you are guilty of listing Sonic Forces as an S-tier game.
Objection!
Overruled.
Both franchises in our history have been very volatile, and what you have done is among the worst of what I have seen and have witnessed throughout my history as both a Mario and a Sonic fan, and therefore, I can only think of one fitting punishment that suits the nature of your crime. Mario, you are to remain on Delfino Island for the remainder of your days. Also, you will be collecting all 120 Shine Sprites. On top of the Pachinko level, all blue coins. Also, the rotten leaf that everyone loves so much. You will be doing all of this without dying as well. And one life that is lost will result in an immediate reset of your progress. And also, during the duration of your sentence here on Delfino, you are also required to 100% the GBA port of Need for Speed Underground. May God have mercy on your soul, because I certainly don't. Hey everyone, how's it going? For almost a week now, I have essentially been on a vacation in a very beautiful and tropical looking place called Delfino Plaza. For those that don't know, this place resides within a video game called Super Mario Sunshine. Now, this was a title that I never played as a kid because I never owned a GameCube. However, I did grow up with Super Mario 64, and that is another game that I still treasure to this very day. And I also want to revisit some other projects associated with it. However, though, now that my vacation is over, I finally decided to take the opportunity to talk about a game that I have been lingering on for a while. One that I've been playing on and off. And yes, it's also a Sonic game, in case you didn't notice the title. This is a game called Sonic Revert. Sonic Revert is a Sonic fan game, and it's a series that's been around for a long time now, and I would even say that Mario and Sonic are probably the two most recognizable platformer franchises I can think of. There are definitely others, for sure, but they are the two most immediate franchises that come to mind. And for some time, I have been going through some of the Sonic games, but I thought simultaneously I would also go through some of the Mario games. Now, what the two games have in common, besides their long history of titles from mains to spin-offs, is the huge ROM hack and fan game community behind the two. Some of the most well-known titles have a mix of ROM hacks and fan games, especially when it comes to Sonic, because Sonic is a series with a lot of fan games, and some can be very good and some can be absolutely amazing, but that's just the nature of fan games and ROM hacks in general, where you're not going to get the most consistent stream of quality with titles. And sometimes some games just end up being either downright bad or just downright cursed. However, in the case of Sonic Revert, this was one that I happen to enjoy quite a lot, even though it's in a relatively unfinished state. Now, what Sonic Revert does here is that it combines both Sonic R and Trackmania into this execution of running through these Trackmania-esque stages with Sonic's aesthetic, as well as Sonic's speed and movement in mind. Now, with Sonic R, that was a game that I come to have a guilty pleasure of, even though I know that the game is deeply flawed and is an undercooked title that had a lot of potential, but it was also a title that had a pretty unique approach to the idea of racing, where you would have these racing style tracks that you would see in other types of games, or say in Mario Kart, but then you would have Sonic's platforming based movement alongside his speed. Sonic Revert, though, tries to realize this idea further by giving you much bigger and wider tracks where you can really let him loose with his speed and his mobility. With Trackmania, though, that's a series that I have dabbled in the past, but not as intimately as what you would see on YouTube with some of the people doing all of these insane runs on some of the most complex racing tracks ever designed. However, what both games have in relation to this fan project is that with Sonic's platforming and speed and Trackmania's complex and infinitely replayable level design, there seems to be this harmonious marriage between the two where it just kind of makes sense. Because when I played Sonic R, I was wondering if there were other titles, even remotely similar to that, where it had a similar idea in mind, where instead of cars, you had these characters that were very mobile, agile, and fast. And Sonic Revert was a game that I discovered shortly after I made a video on Sonic R. And so far, I've been pleasantly surprised at this game. For starters, the physics and the movement for a fan game is actually not too bad. The 4 tracks that you do get are varied, but ultimately you navigate them in a similar manner due to the fact that each of the 4 characters that you have, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Shadow, each have their own distinctive abilities that separate them from each other, minus with Sonic and Shadow, which are pretty similar to each other in this game in particular. However, with Tails and Knuckles, they have their own abilities that give them unique opportunities to navigate throughout the tracks in more unorthodox ways, like with Tails' flying, where he can, in this one, he can jump 3 times in a row, or say with Knuckles, he can glide, which can enable him to ignore vast distances and sometimes outright ignore loops entirely if you know where to jump off of. In this one, you have currently at the moment 4 tracks. You have Green Hill, Marble Zone, Casino Night, and Time City. Now, each track has their own distinctive aesthetic, but like I said, you go about them the same manner. They just have different layouts, different loops, also different obstacles that you have to go for. But ultimately, the goal in this game is to either race other opponents online in the guise of players, or simply just go for your own personal record where you try to complete the track as quick as you possibly can. So with Sonic Revert, or at least the idea of this fan project was, at least from my understanding, it was designed to go for 2 objectives in mind. So you had it being a racing game and also a speedrunning game at the same time. Because when you're racing other opponents, you're also essentially trying to speedrun through the track, because the whole idea is to go through the track as fast as possible. But alternatively, you do have, at the very least, an offline approach to enjoying the main loop of this game, because aside there being other players in the race online mode, you really are just going through these tracks in the same kind of manner. So you're experimenting with the movement and the physics of the game, the verticality that your characters can achieve, like through the obstacles or through some of the boost platforms, on top of the way that your character can also go up and down through the loops, and your camera will sort of adjust to your positioning, which can be admittedly tricky at times, especially when you're trying to beat your PR and you make some mistakes here and there. But that's kind of the beauty behind this game, is, how it understands the rewards for trial and error, where you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and quite frequently so at the beginning, but once you finally execute it, you'll be flying through these levels and it will just feel so seamless. And, that's something you also see in Trackmania, where you see these PR records of people soaring through these very difficult and complex tracks, but they're doing it like it's yesterday, like as if they've always been doing it, and it just seems so easy from the viewer's perspective. Revert has that similar kind of feeling after you go through these stages multiple times, and you beat your own records, or say if you participate in online races, you manage to beat other players, or if you just sort of get close, there's that near infinite sense of progression that you can get into this game. However, with its current state, its somewhat unfinished state, there is definitely a lot to be desired. On the one hand, while I do like the low poly models of the characters, in fact, they kind of remind me of Sonic R and Sonic Jam, but everything else kind of just has this, unfinished feel to it. Like with the tracks themselves, they're not too complicated to read, but they're not necessarily that interesting to look at either. Like, the game definitely could have done with a little bit more visual flair to it. I mean, contrast this to, say, another fan project like, say, Sonic Utopia. That's a game that tries to dedicate itself to looking as close as possible to the classic titles, but still looking, appealing to look at the same time. There are also other fan games that, have a bit more to it with their visual look, whereas this game feels like it's still in a prototype kind of phase where they have the characters, or at least the low poly characters, the early looking models nailed down to an extent, but everything else seems like it has a bit more potential to have a bit more life injected into it. And art style is one of those things that can really elevate a game that's already pretty fun to play. imagine what this game would feel and play like with a little bit more eye candy injected into it. And also, while this project is pretty fun to play, like at times, especially when you have someone you want to play with or when you can organize a group of people to do like a Sonic race, there is really only just the 4 levels that you have. And apparently the developer was originally planning to do 7, but according to one post that I read on itch.io, the development cycle at this stage, or at least with how long the game has been out for and is still in this current state, seems to be a case of I will put more maps into it when I feel like it, and then once all the 7 maps are done, then that's it. And I do look forward to seeing more maps being pumped into this game and maybe some artistic refinements, added into the overall visual look, because it is admittedly a bit bland, even for a fan project, at least compared to some of the other ones that I've seen that look absolutely incredible. But you're not going to be having bloodshot eyes by the end of the session. Like, in spite of the somewhat primitive, low poly kind of look it has going for it, there is some nice variety between those 4 levels. And some of them have some neat mechanics, like with the Casino Night level, there's the bouncing platforms that you can use to sort of bounce up and down. Or sometimes when you go further down, you can turn yourself into a ball and just go at absolutely insane speeds, like reaching nearly 1,000 and over, which was like, holy shit. My favorites though, overall, probably Green Hill and Time City. Now, the reason for those two is, for one, Green Hill just has that nice, vibrant aesthetic that I really like, especially when you look at, Green Hill Zone, where it's just pleasing to look at on top of the colors that are associated with it. And Time Zone for its portal-based mechanics, where it takes, its own level, but then warps you into Marble Zone, and then you go back and forth until you finally complete the level. And I just really liked the portal aspect, because, you like the seamless transitions on top of the ludicrous speeds you're going at, it rewards that, effort you make for precision on top of, getting as much speed as possible. And Sonic Revert is really just what it tries to be, or at least it plays with the idea of trying to be a mix of Sonic R and Trackmania. And I personally found this to be a lot more enjoyable than Sonic R, just because it feels a lot better to play. The idea feels a bit more realized, and I feel like the tracks were much more appropriate than, say, the tracks that you had in Sonic R, because you have a lot more space, you have a lot more opportunities to go out of bounds, basically giving you multiple ways of going through each track each time, all for the effort of either, say, coming first place or just getting a faster record, Sonic Revert is one of those fan projects that, may not be completely finished, but there is definitely enough there that, it warrants a playthrough. Or, if you're into the Sonic games, or if you're into fan games and ROM hacks in general, this is definitely one that I would personally recommend checking out. And, if this project does have a future in continual development, or even if it's just on and off, I do have a proposition, that I think would benefit the game. And that is to include perhaps some sort of built-in add-on, or like an editor where people can inject their own assets or textures and have, the ability to either make maps within the game or to be able to import their own maps within the game. This is just an idea in case the game never really gets fully finished, because I think this game has a pretty good foundation for what it tries to do. And having something like along the lines of a level editor or a means of importing maps into the project, using the same engine that it uses, I think would give it pretty much an infinite life cycle as long as there is still interest in the game. And that's the thing. The beauty of fan games and ROM hacks is that it's always supported by people who are genuinely passionate about it. And, while the level of quality between a lot of these projects will always waver, depending on who's making it and how it's executed, the passion is generally always consistent. And, even in a game like Sonic Revert, with its, potential and its unfinished state, where it could reach that potential eventually, that passion and that enjoyment of Sonic's movement and speed is still there. If you're looking for something where, you just want to move about the tracks and not worry about a story, or trying to collect all the Chaos Emeralds again and doing some of those, filthy special stages, then this is one that's worth having a try, and I would highly recommend it. I may also touch upon other fan projects, not just from Sonic, but other games too, if that interests anyone. I may also come up with a list of fan projects and ROM hacks that are also worth checking out, but I thought I would just start off with this game, and Sonic Revert is pretty damn good for what it is. Would highly recommend it. Anyway, that's all I have for now. I definitely have some other things planned and other things I would like to talk about, but for now, I'm just gonna do a bit of a, unwinding period and just think about what I want to do next. Anyway, thanks guys. Give Sonic Revert a try, see if you can get into a match or not, and if you do, have fun.